Parents, the following program is intended for people over the age of 13. Peter Bernard's Scary Stories for Adults.
Welcome to the DOGMAN Days of August on Scary Stories NYC. I'm your old pal Bigfoot. We've got 3 scary stories tonight, each of them brand new and never heard before. We'll get to all 3 of them in a moment, but first, I'm excited to announce that today's executive producer is one of our favorite people in the comments section, Moonchild93. Some say she's smart, and some say wild. I say she's kind, 'cause she's Moonchild. A heartfelt thank you to her from me. She's the ultra cool Moonchild93. Thank you so much, Moonchild. We genuinely appreciate your contributions to the cause. If you would like to be kind and smart like Moonchild93, just join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com, or do what Moonchild did and become a channel member by clicking join below this video. After you do join, you get links to over 10 hours of scary, uncensored Dogman stories far too wild to tell on this channel. And speaking of this channel, it's time to dive into day 2 of the Dogman Days of August. You know, we Bigfoot don't have air conditioning for the most part. When we want to cool off, we take a dive into some large body of water and take a swim. That's what the guy who sent us this email figured on doing as well. Unfortunately, 2 far larger individuals got the same idea before he did, and that led to the battle royale known as Dogman versus Alligator. Dear Scary Stories NYC, this is a story about a sighting I had 2 summers ago in Youngblood, Alabama. I was taking a day off for my mental health and wandering through nature. I came upon Youngblood Creek there in the woods, and I thought I saw an overturned rowboat floating along. Moving closer to get myself a better look, I saw that it was not a boat at all, but a real-life alligator. Something about the situation caused me to decide to remain quiet. For some reason, I didn't want to give away my position, but I wanted to observe this alligator swimming for as long as I could. While not really that uncommon, I personally had never seen an alligator up around Youngblood before. I saw some down south when I was younger, but not up here. So when I watched it swimming along with just its top exposed to the air, I was pretty interested. You might say I was drinking it in. The eyes on that gator reminded me of Godzilla from the old 1960s and 1970s films. Not so much the more recent Godzilla films, but the way the eyes stuck up on top of its head really resembled the old school rubber suits they used to use in the old movies. The alligator really looked to me like something that could have existed in basically the same form millions of years ago. I imagined that I actually was back in time, and yet nothing had changed. The creek still flowed slowly, and the gator still swam there in the murky, unclear water. Suddenly, that brownish, dirty water erupted in white foam in all directions. I nearly cried out in surprise, but I caught myself and remained silent, trying to understand what was going on in that water. The alligator was flipping around wildly, thrashing with every part of its body. At first, I couldn't understand why the gator would be doing this, but then I noticed dark, colored, shiny, wet appendages wrapped around its midsection from below. Something in that water was grabbing it. Something that apparently had what looked very much like human arms. I took a few steps closer to the water to see better, but I tried to remain quiet, as something still told me I better not give away my presence there. By this point, the gator and the other figure were rolling over each other in the water, and crashing in a clumsy manner into the opposite shore of the creek. My first impression was that the gator was wrestling with a very tall man in a black skin diving suit. The longer I stared, though, as they wrestled on the beach, the more the wet skin diving suit seemed to resemble wet dog fur getting caked with sand. Somehow, both creatures ended standing up bipedally, wrestling with each other. I think the dark-furred monster man was standing under his own power, and that he had lifted the gator up with him as he stood. In that brief moment, I saw something so horrible that I forgot my decision to remain quiet. I saw something so terrible to see that I screamed incoherently and uncontrollably. I turned and ran, so I only saw this briefly, as I said. But what I saw was that the hairy man had a dog or wolf-like head. It sort of resembled some of the werewolves you see in the more modern horror movies. It was like a man for the most part, but it was a dog at the same time somehow. It looked evil, but I was seeing it in the middle of a battle. Still, I felt that it was evil and I ran. I never looked behind. I don't know if I was followed. I just know that I ran. When I got home, I told my wife what I'd seen. Believe it or not, she ignored what I said about the dog man, and she told me that she didn't believe we would have gators living near us in Youngblood. It's just too far north. Like, that was the part she found unbelievable? I'm certain that what I saw was an alligator, though. The snout seemed kind of long and narrow for a gator, but that's what it had to be. We don't get crocodiles this far north, that's for certain. But then again, we aren't supposed to get werewolves around here either. I still felt freaked out from the entire thing, and my wife found the story boring, so I started calling up my friends to tell them. I soon regretted that, as they all wanted me to take them there and show them. They wanted to see either one, the dogman or the gator. They did talk me into going back the next day, but by then we couldn't find anything of interest in the area. Still, nobody doubted me because they could see how uncomfortable and frightened I was just to be there, even with all of them. I tell you, I look at the wilds of Alabama a lot differently since the day that I saw Dogman versus Alligator. The Dogman of New Jersey, or the Large Dogs Area. Dear Scary Stories NYC, around a 40-minute drive outside of New York City, there is a place called South Orange, New Jersey. That's where I grew up, and where some of my family still lives. I love South Orange, and most of what I have to say about it is positive. There was one horrifying day I spent there, though, about 2 decades ago, and I know that's the only day of my life that you're going to be interested in. Why? Because that was the day when I got chased out of a public park in South Orange by the Dogman of New Jersey. Back when 9/11 happened, I lost a brother and inherited his dog, who we can call Fido. He was one of those Marmaduke dogs, really giant, and man, could he eat a lot. One evening I brought him out to the dog run, and we had a terrifying encounter with the Dogman. At South Mountain Dog Park, they have a special large dog area. There have always been people there with their oversized pooches each time I went. I was friendly acquaintances with most of the people, and Fido played with their dogs. On that one evening in 2002, though, we got there later than usual, and the clouds were gathering for rain. I was surprised to find the place completely empty, but decided to let Fido have some exercise anyway, so I tossed his toy around and let him chase after it. One time, he just missed and it bounced off his nose in the direction of the chain link fence separating the dog run from the nearby forest. Something past the fence caught my eye, and I became distracted for a while. I could swear I saw a person out there. That seemed kinda creepy to me, a person lurking past the dog run. What kind of guy does that for kicks? After not seeing anything else move for a while, we returned to playing, but I kept my eye over there, watching peripherally. If it was an illusion, it should still repeat itself so that I could understand what I had seen. Nothing seemed to be moving out there any longer, so we began playing a little faster and wilder. I wanted Fido to get to race around a bit, otherwise he was never going to let me get to sleep that night. Once again, a similar thing happened as before, when the toy bounced off the jumping dog's nose and bounced over by the chain link fence. Fido bounded over there playfully, then froze, a foot in front of the fence, staring beyond it at something I couldn't see. The hair on the dog's back rose, and its tail went between its legs as it turned, frightened, and ran back toward me, leaving its play toy there. I knelt down to catch him, but he ran right past me and all the way back to my car, whining in fear, shaking all over like he had palsy or something. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I looked back at that chain link fence just in time to see a very tall, hair-covered, naked man grab my dog's play toy and leap over the chain link fence almost silently. I shouted at him to stop, and he turned around and growled at me. It was some kind of a dog mixed with a bear. It walked like a bear on its hind legs, but it was thin like a dog and incredibly athletic. The way it leaped that chain link fence would have won it the gold in the Olympics. My dog was right to fear this thing. I hadn't even seen it come over the fence toward us, and now I was watching it recede into the trees past the large dog area. I ran away from it as well. The skies opened up into a major lightning storm as we drove home, and poor Fido was a nervous wreck for that entire night. I was afraid that he would never want to go back to the dog run, but each time we returned, there were other people and dogs there, and he was fine with it. For the rest of his life, Fido and I only ever ran into the four-legged kind of canine when we would visit the large dog area. The Dogwood Park Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC. When I was in my early 20s, I dated a girl who was as mischievous as I was in those days. We used to like to do weird things like go to old cemeteries in the middle of the night and tell each other scary stories to see who would get freaked out first. A mutual friend had told us there was a really old, abandoned, spooky cemetery off in the woods north of the campgrounds in the Kisatchie National Forest. We decided to go camping and planned on sneaking out into the dark woods at some point after midnight to see if we could locate this old cemetery and see if it was really there. Now, as I'm putting this email together for you, I'm looking at an online map, and I see they do indicate a cemetery in those woods. It even has a name. They call it the Old Bellwood Cemetery. You see, I never actually saw it with my own two eyes because, well, I'll get to that part when I get to it. The name of the little road that both the campground and the nearby ranger station are on is Dogwood Park Road, but I don't know if there's actually a park around there called Dogwood Park. To my knowledge, it's the Kisatchie National Forest, but maybe they used to call it Dogwood Park a long time ago or something. At any rate, my girlfriend and I were calling it Dogman Park Road between ourselves as a joke or something even as we drove in. We both were monster fans, although I'm not 100% sure if we believed in them, or if we just thought TV shows about monsters were, less boring than other TV shows of that era. I don't remember being very afraid of Bigfoot or aliens as we would sit in old cemeteries, but sometimes I would get scared at the idea of certain kinds of ghosts or zombies or vampires maybe. I guess that was the kind of thing I was scared of when I dated that girl. So, the first time we tried to head off to the cemetery, this busybody lady who was also camping there shouted loudly at us that we were heading in the wrong direction. She got louder and more frantic, till it became obvious she was a real jerk, and she was going to cause trouble for us if we continued on into those trees past the end of the campground. She was shouting that it was dangerous, but she was also shouting things about it being illegal. I could tell she was one of those people who has nothing to do but cause trouble for everyone else, so we retreated back to our camp. We took turns standing watch until the creepy old bat seemed to finally have fallen asleep. I think it was 2 or 3 in the morning by then. We were tired, and we were annoyed, but we were finally getting to do what we came there to do. I remember us both feeling excited as we tiptoed out of the campground and off into the vegetation, flashlights in our hands. My girlfriend stopped being as playful as usual when we entered the tree cover. I could tell something was wrong by the way she was acting and the expression on her face. Finally, I asked her what was up, and she asked me if I was serious. "Don't you smell that?" she asked. Nope, I couldn't. Smell what? She was convinced that she was smelling wet dog. After a while, I thought I could start to smell it too, but I wasn't sure if it was just because of her suggestion. I mean, it certainly wasn't the strongest or the worst wet dog smell I'd ever endured. I figured it was because it was humid out, and we were in the forest. Everything is constantly dying, rotting, and coming back to life in the woods. The rotting part can get smelly. She told me I was right, but her face said she didn't think she was just smelling the dampness. I had brought white handkerchiefs with me to tie to tree branches. I would tie a new one within eyesight of the last one each time, so I would have a visual guide to get us back out of there once we were done with our evening of fun. We walked and walked, but we weren't finding tombstones, and I started to think we should be heading back. I only had 2 handkerchiefs left to tie to branches. My girlfriend was over this as well. We were both ready to call it a night and head back to camp. As we turned around, though, we were both more than a little surprised to see a very large bear-like figure blocking our way. At first, all I could see was its shape. Then my girlfriend shone her flashlight on it, and it recoiled from the light, making a growling sound more like a dog than like a bear. Everything I was seeing in her flashlight looked more canine than ursine to me. Were we really seeing a dogman so close to what we had jokingly referred to as Dogman Park Road? It had never been a funny joke, and now it was becoming truly sad. We were staring into the glowing eyes of this 7 or 8 foot tall linebacker kind of a dog bear man. It didn't like us staring at him, and he began to bark at us, walking quickly in our direction on his massive hind legs. I took off running, screaming in terror. My girlfriend did as well, but I found that out later. We both tore into the woods, heading away from our camp, but also away from that dog man. We ran blindly and crazily, not having any idea where we were going. After a few minutes of exhausting racing over and under Flora in the dark and falling on my face multiple times, I heard my girlfriend weeping nearby, and the 2 of us reconnected. I held her, and she let it out while I tried to listen for the dog man. When she was together enough to start walking again, I suggested we walk in the direction we presumed to be east. If we trekked in that direction for around an hour, I felt certain we would run into that road on the other side there. This map I'm looking at says the road is called FR336. I'll take their word for it. She agreed, and off we went, not really knowing what way we were going, and not knowing if we would walk right back into that dog man all over again. We did have cell phones back then, I think, and maybe they had texting on them, but they didn't have GPS, I'm certain of that. I doubt we would have had a signal out there anyway. So While we thought we were walking east, we somehow were actually walking northwest, I guess. One way or another, we ended up walking back to Route 117. Once we knew where we were, it was easy to get back to our camp. I think we slept until 4 in the afternoon that next day. We had been up late, but the fear that we might not make it back was far more tiring than that. We never did get to see that old graveyard because we ran headfirst into the Dogwood Park Dogman.
Overheated? Keep cool with our Dogman Days of August. At least one new Dogman story every single day of August. How many days are there in August anyway? Oh, that's right. That means you get to hear at least 117 all-new Dogman stories before September. Right here on Scary Stories NYC. Now, could you please pass the tanning butter?
And now, get ready for an all-new, completely uncensored, slightly bloody, and absolutely terrifying new Dogman story. Oh, wait. YouTube won't allow me to tell you stories like that on this channel. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to peterbernard.com and sign up for our paid subscribers club. You can choose any price you can afford for a 1-month subscription, and then every weekend, we tell you a story YouTube would never allow us to tell you on this channel. See you this Sunday for an all-new, very scary, completely uncensored Dogman story.
Come back for more scary stories.